right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on this webinar series. As mentioned just before, we took a short little break to give everyone a chance to log on. I did highlight that I'm Enoch Mufikwe, the Learning and Development Practitioner for Geotab Africa. And today's webinar series is an exciting one, It's one of those ones that there are a lot of questions, and we're going to be doing our best to see if we can get the opportunity in diving in and answering some of these questions, all right? Yes, we are talking about EVs, electric vehicles, all right? So before we start with the webinar session, just to go through a couple of housekeeping rules to make sure that everything is in perfect order. Just a reminder, our webinar series are recorded, and should your connection be lost or you have problems with your connection, do not be too concerned or alarmed. The webinar is recorded and you can basically have access to the full version, which is uninterrupted on our social media platforms, YouTube, we've got Twitter. We will be sharing some of our links after the session. Like our social medias and follow Geotab Africa. Should you have any questions, please put them in our question and answer section, and we will try our best to definitely attend to all of them by the end of the session, and they will be addressed at the end as mentioned. Any additional questions that you might have, you may or can be sent to info@geotabafrica.com, and our dedicated support team will definitely assist you as quickly as possible. All right, so without wasting any further time, let's jump into our session for today. In the meantime, make sure that you guys are comfortable, have your cups of coffee with you. We will be spending roughly about 30 minutes or so of the session. So before we jump into the session, I've got Elena, who is joining us on today's session. Elena is our EV specialist from Geotab Canada. Elena, morning.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me, Enoch, and the team from Geotab South Africa. I'm happy to be here, and I am actually based now in the UK.
Elena?
Can you hear me?
All right, thank you very much and welcome. Looking forward to having you, and thank you for availing yourself for this session. Hope you're going to enjoy it and have a great time. All right. So just to look at some of the things that we can expect from today's session, we will basically be covering EVs. We will be touching on an overview of what is an EV, right? An electric vehicle. This is something that most of us actually, we know the idea, but we're going to be diving into the idea a little bit deeper on. And we're going to be exploring furthermore, what types of EVs are actually available to the South African market. Believe it or not, we've got a couple of models that are also currently available. Also, we'll be looking at how going electric is made convenient by Geotab through our EVSA platform. And then where does your fleet also tie into this? And lastly, as mentioned, we're going to be diving furthermore as to how does Geotab provide a fleet-based solution when it comes to an EV perspective. So what is an EV, which is one of the basic questions that we have. An electric vehicle is basically a vehicle that is partially powered by electricity or by a fuel combustion engine. And in most cases, this is where we see that EVs have low running costs, right? They have fewer moving parts. And when we're describing the part that EVs have fewer moving parts, this is one of the advantages of EVs and why fleets need to go the direction of EVs. Now, remember that by removing all these moving parts like the oil, the combustion system basically in an engine, this is where maintenance is kept at a minimum, if one can put it that way. It's kept at a very minimum, not only with regards to the maintenance. Now, we start talking about fuel versus electricity and how is the cost breakdown, or where does the balance come in, where we say it's actually going to save you money, all right? Most EVs currently running run on lithium-ion batteries. And this is where a research has shown that in the past 5 to 10 years, the price of lithium batteries have actually dropped down to about 80%. And what does this mean for you and me, or the typical users or fleet managers? With the dropping of the lithium-ion battery, it basically means the price of electric vehicles is actually going to be more affordable. It's going to be more manageable. It's no longer going to be a taboo of talking about prices that are almost reaching millions, because now the production of EVs is going to be lower, as the battery itself is the main power source in the electric vehicles. So with that results of the prices itself reducing, it's good news for everyone. And that is why, as Geotab, we are the #1 fleet-based telematics provider. We have taken the step of moving on and saying, if we are going the electric way, let us be there first, so that when you and the rest of South Africa come on board, then already Geotab is ahead of the solution. And already we have taken the step. All right, through the EVSA, but let me not spoil it. We're going to be jumping into the EVSA later on. I'll be giving Elena on the other side a platform just to discuss what does EVSA have for you and myself. All right, so while we're talking about EVs, there are basically 3 different types or 3 different kinds of electric vehicles. It's the hybrid or the HEV. We've got the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And lastly, we've got the BEV, which is the battery electric vehicle. And then just to dive in more detail on each and what does it basically mean. All right, so the hybrid vehicle or the HEV is powered by an internal combustion engine. All right, this is where it's combined with 1 or more electric motors. So with the hybrid, this is where we find, for example, we've had the Toyota Prius many years ago, where in certain instances, electricity, you don't even have to plug it, where the car itself can self-generate or regenerate, if I can say recharge itself, by the braking system, you know. As the engine parts are moving, we've got the heat that is created by the vehicle. In certain vehicles, also assisting with regards to the recharging of the electric motor. So the hybrid is where really the costs are kept at the minimum. It increases fuel economy, as you can see, and it says here, HEVs can be both mild or full hybrids, right? So that's the first one. We've got the HEVs. Then the second type of electric vehicle is the plug-in hybrid vehicles. So with the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, they use batteries to power an electric motor. And another fuel like your gasoline can be used to power an internal combustion engine. They can be plugged in to charge the battery, as well as to fuel the combustion engine, or the IEC, also referred to. Right now, drivers can entirely go electric mode on the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. What does this mean for you? Extended range. Now consider yourself in different industries. You can think of something like the last mile delivery. Where does this tie in? It allows for you to basically cover most of your targeted distance for the day, if one can mention it that way. All right. And then lastly, in terms of the types of EVs that we have, we've got the battery electric vehicle. It's also known as the all electric vehicles. Now, this is the mostly common known type of EV that most of us know, all right? It's powered entirely by battery power, meaning there is no combustion engine or the whole mechanism of a traditional combustion engine in the BEVs or electric vehicles. It's typically more expensive than similar conventional and hybrid vehicles, but some costs can be recovered through fuel savings. And that is one of the main discussions that we're going to be doing. When we're talking about the cost, we all hear that you will be saving cost when it comes to electric vehicle. This is where now, when we start talking about the longer term, the longevity of your fleet, the cost now starts to flip around, right? It's categorized as zero emission vehicles, and also it requires little maintenance. I've mentioned this before, just now earlier on. In terms of the full or all electric vehicles, there is less movement parts or moving parts. With that, there is low maintenance costs. Repair costs are kept at a minimum. All right. So now that we've mentioned a couple of types of EVs available, electric vehicles, we've touched on what is an electric vehicle. This is just a basic education on the topic. We will be then diving into your EVSA. Powered by the largest data set for real-world EV performances. Our EV suitability assessment, which is EVSA, it offers data-driven EV recommendations. So what it does for you is when you're using Geotab, not only does it traditionally help you to manage your fleet, but now it's stepping in to say, let's make the transitioning process of zero electric to 100% electricity as convenient and hassle-free as possible. The platform will do an assessment for you to say, amongst your fleet, say, for example, you have 500 vehicles or 50 vehicles in your fleet. The EVSA will do an assessment for you to determine which ones are more suitable to actually take a transition to move over to your EV. And with that being said, I'm sure Elena will dive in deeper in this. This is where also it identifies for you which type of EV is recommended. Are we talking about the hybrids, the plug-in hybrids, or even the all-electric vehicles? All right. Assists in analyzing your fleet's driving profits, or profiles rather, and patterns to identify the vehicles best suited for EV. We've covered that. Receive fleet electrification blueprint by analyzing the total cost of ownership and revealing the potential cost saving. And remember, when you're talking about the total cost of ownership, last year, I think it was June, we covered the topic of total cost of ownership. What does it mean for you as a fleet-based organization when you have to turn over and sell some of your vehicles? Will you be making a profit after a certain time of period after using EVs? This is where the EVSA or your suitability assessment will assist and give guidelines in terms of that. Okay. So what can EVSA tell you or tell me once I've started using it? So this is where it's going to be giving us as fleet managers, take your control room. This is where it allows for us to monitor or just to have a bit of range assurance, where you will actually relax and know or have confidence that the platform will give identification or you will receive accurate EV make and model recommendations. Not only that, you will receive in-depth analysis based on real-world EV performances. All right, that's the range assurance. It will check if the battery will still cover your range requirements. So once you dispatch your drivers to certain customers, for example, whether it's last mile delivery, whether it's your courier, this is where it identifies what is the percentage of the vehicles or the battery inside the vehicles and what range is left basically as to cover your targeted range for that period or for that day. Okay. And then secondly, what will the EVSA cover or what will you basically get from the EVSA? Financial analysis. So with the financial analysis, this is where it's giving you a comparison between your non-EV fleet of vehicles compared to your electric vehicle or EV-based vehicles. What will you be saving as of now versus the longevity or in the near future of your vehicles being on the road? You will discover the cost-saving potentials and how will my cost structure change. I think before any fleet managers considers to even transition from non-EV to EV, one of the main questions will be things like, will my fleet be able to do what they need to do still? Will this impact the range that we cover during the day? So with the financial analysis, this is one of the best ways or the best places to start is to say, where do we stand financially by transitioning to electric vehicle? Again, the platform has the analysis where it can assist with regards to determining that point. Okay. Then lastly, slowly we are moving in this direction where we need to be environmental conscious, or if I can say, take the impact of the environment to seriousness. And with Geotab already, before we even considered EVSA, my Geotab already provided the platform for you to start calculating things like your emissions and your fuel spending based on how your drivers are performing or the driver behavior. Things like higher revving, or engine abuse. With our reports, remember that it will assist you in trying to maintain environmental impacts as low as possible, right? So here we see that it will help you to calculate your annual CO2 emissions, identify whether you qualify for environmental benefits of switching to EVs, which is something that is already being in discussions with the government as we speak. You will have an idea about how much your fleet's carbon emissions will decrease, and overall the fuel reduction, as mentioned with our fuel reports, all right? And South African's passenger car fleet average CO2 emissions stands at 148 grams per kilometer. That is still a bit high. And once we are now conscious of these behaviors, we will slowly be taking it down, and hopefully in the near future, who knows, in the next 3 years, we've seen that statistics are showing that we are moving towards the right direction. Currently, it says here 23%, and looking at what? 45%, okay. All right, so what vehicles or what is currently available to SA market? That's a main question. I've had a discussion yesterday with one of our leading stakeholders when it comes to the EV industry. And the question was, do we even have vehicles on the road which are EV? And one could be surprised. We've got a lot of vehicles that the South African consumer market have. Already, we've got things like our multi-purpose vehicles, which is the Hyundai Staria. We've got the Porsche Taycan and the Jaguar I-Pace, which are more now in the luxury industry, or the what do you say? The luxury category. And we've seen actually a research that was done where one of the vehicles, it was the Jaguar, was actually driven from Joburg down to Durban, just to see the idea, just to uncover the myth or the fact behind the cost saving. And with the vehicle stopping at your normal regular garages that or petrol stations that we normally take, for example, from Johannesburg, if you look as you travel down the N3, we've got the Villiers engine garage, stopping there for, let's say, 15 to 30 minutes. This is where we saw that the driver was actually able to keep the battery percentage below 40%. As he drives on, getting to your Shell garage, there by Pietermaritzburg, again, just spend your normal 15 to 30 minutes to just try and recharge. One of the questions was, why spend 30 minutes charging? If you think about it, again, we're talking about long distance traveling. That's how much time you and I spend when we're doing long distance traveling in terms of taking a break, going to the garage, getting something to eat. Consider that as your lunch driving. We all need that. It's a safety aspect, all right? And the vehicle managed to actually save costs, all right? And then further here, we've got other vehicles. We've got the Mini Cooper SE, the Toyota Prius, the Audi e-trons. And in terms of those are the vehicles that are currently on the market. But also to mention, we do have a few that are actually now more suitable for our day-to-day last mile delivery industries. For example, we've got the My Power electric minibus. We've got the electric pickup, as it says there, which is manufactured by EVSA. Now, this electric pickup, ladies and gentlemen, is quite awesome. This is now introducing things like the farming industry in terms of range coverage. And not only that, with EVSA, speaking about EVSA, we also have another fleet that is, another vehicle that is more suitable for your last mile delivery, the EVSA minibus. And with that being said, I think I can bring in Elena into the show.
Thank you, Enoch. I'll take over. I don't know if you may need to stop sharing. Okay. I believe you can see my screen now. Is that right? So we're going to talk about EVSA, so what Enoch mentioned to you in the previous slide. So I'm just going to do a demo to see how really this tool works, and that is quite easy to use, and how and the real value that it can bring to your fleet. So we have the EVSA added into my Geotab database, and we'll proceed with starting a new assessment. So what we'll do here, just begin, and then we will select the regional territory. So South Africa is not yet one of the countries here, but it should hopefully that will come soon. So we'll go rest of the world, and then the currency, as you could see here, is US dollars, and the units are in metric. So that's the unit of measure. What does the EVSA? So we'll assess the data based on your fleet's activity for a period of time. We need minimum 1 month of data, and the recommended time is here 3 months. If you would have fleets that or you have activity that is more seasonal, then in this case, we would highly recommend choosing past 12 months as opposed to 3 months or so. I'll just go for the standard recommendation past 3 months, and I'll just continue. Here we have the classes of vehicles that we have available to run an EVSA. So remember EVSA, EV suitability assessment. So to see what vehicles the system could recommend based on the fleet that you have. So if you would have minivans or passenger cars or SUVs, so that these are the most popular ones at the moment. So I will go for passenger cars. This is the demo database where we have our staff vehicles. And then I will select from here. So I have already grouped my vehicles in the database by type. So remember, Enoch mentioned to you about BEV, which is battery electric vehicle, PHEV, so plug-in hybrids and hybrids. So I'm not going to select any of them, but I will select ICE, so internal combustion engine. So these are the ones that I want to assess to see if I can complete, so if I can transition to EV. And then you will see here we have a list of recommended vehicles that will be possibly suggested as a replacement for the vehicles that you have at the moment. And keeping in mind to what Enoch said regarding the vehicles that are available in terms of EV models available in South Africa. So if the models are not available, you can just, like Fiat was now one of the ones that he mentioned. So I can just remove it from the list that would be possibly recommended. BMW is one that if I remember well, that was one of the vehicles in the list that had on the slide, and there may be some others. So you just go through the list. The list is quite long. We have a number of vehicles, and then we also have plug-in hybrids. So if, for example, you want to remove some of them or keep them, I will keep most of them, and I will just continue. And then I have two options here. So the system is asking me, do I intend to purchase the vehicle or do I intend to lease the vehicle? And if I intend to purchase, which I'm going to go for, how long will I intend to keep that vehicle? So normally, like an average, a fleet may keep their vehicles for about 7 years. Of course, you can modify that if you want to adjust the number. And I'll just continue. And here I have, so the average electricity price overnight. So you will know, according to the electricity provider that you have, you may probably have a slightly cheaper price than this one, or it may be slightly different. So you feel free to adjust it. So for example, instead of 0.14, I can do 0.11 cents, US dollars per kilowatt an hour. That's the conversion, so you would probably need to convert from South African rands. And then here I have the list of vehicles with an estimated cost, purchasing cost for the vehicles that I have in the system. So for example, if I would be interested in a particular one, or depending on the list that you have selected for you to have as possible recommendation. So if you have, let's say, a dealer that would offer you a better price than the estimate here, or a slightly different price, feel free to actually modify it. So you can click on modify estimates. So I will modify the procurement cost. So let's say I could possibly get it with 50,000 instead of 57,000. What will be my annual cost? That's the annual maintenance cost. Keep in mind, for EVs, normally maintenance is generally cheaper than the internal combustion engine. If you know for sure that may be slightly different, you can change that. And then there are some additional fields that you can fill, such as residual/resale value. So if in 7 years I will resell this vehicle, I can add an estimate with what would be the price that I may resell this vehicle. And if I do this here, then I would have to do the same for an internal combustion engine. So the system will take two options into consideration. So we'll take either EV recommendation, including plug-in hybrids, and internal combustion engine as a recommendation. So we can modify the estimates for both type of vehicles. And then if you have any other details that you can add, some EV incentives that you may get, or the insurance cost that you want to, for sure that is that would be looking like. So I'll save it, and of course I can modify multiple vehicles, and I totally recommend, like, the ones that you may be interested in, modify the estimates according to what is relevant to you. And I'll continue now. And here is the average fuel price. So I think from what I could see, I was looking at earlier, it may be slightly higher than the fuel price. Of course, then it depends if it's diesel or petrol. That will, but you would know to adapt it to your case. And then remember, I need to also add in the system estimates for a generic passenger car that is internal combustion engine. So if I know that, for example, I've added previously the residual or resale value for an EV, I would need to add it here as well. If the procurement cost would be different, the annual maintenance would be different, and so on. So I can add all the details here, save it, and I will finish my assessment. So now I just have to go to the homepage of the EVSA add-in. What will happen is that the system will take, depending on your fleet size, it can take up to 60 minutes to analyze all the data. You can see here computing results. But what I have done, I have run last evening a number of assessments. You can see here the ones I've run. So I can just compare, I can do different estimates, compare different options. So I will show you one that I've run previously. So we don't have to wait until that is loading. So here is the results from the one I have. So I have assessed 48 vehicles in total from my fleet. The system recommended me for 15 of those to transition to battery electric vehicles, so BEV, and 6 of those plug-in hybrids, and 27 of the 48, there are no EV feeds. So the system still recommends me to continue with internal combustion engine. And here in the summary section, I will have all the information around lifetime savings. So something that Enoch showed you in the previous slide. We have assessment recommendation and then non-EV replacement. So if I would buy new internal combustion engine vehicles, this is what my cost will look like. And if I'm following the assessment recommendation, this is what my cost look like. Of course, we know the procurement side will be a little bit higher, but when we look at the rest, maintenance is less as a cost, and then I will use less fuel because I'll have less vehicles that are using fuel. And of course, the electricity price is cheaper, and that's overall, this will be my lifetime savings for the period of time that I've analyzed. And then we can look at annual fuel and electricity summary, so a comparison between what will be my assessment recommendation, new non-EV replacement, and my current fleet. So that's the cost that I'm having now, and the annual CO2 tailpipe emission summary. So the system will tell me what what will be my CO2 emissions if I follow the assessment recommendation. Remember, my recommendation is I will have mixed fleet. If I'm just buying non-EV replacement, then this is what will look like. And for my current fleet, this is the actual state. Now, what you may want to know as well is if I'm not being recommended to transition to EV, what are the reasons behind that? So remember, we're really using live data, and we can look at closer at that at the reasons. So here I have the vehicles with suitable recommendations, and then I can look at each vehicle. So my vehicles that I have at the moment in the system versus what is being recommended. So and if I scroll down, I will have vehicles without suitable EV recommendations. So this is something that you may be quite interested to look at. So these are the list of the vehicles that they're not yet suitable to be transitioned to EV, and the reason. So it may be because of the days with insufficient driving distance. So for the 3 months that I've been assessing, so 1 day out of the 93 days that this vehicle has driven, I wouldn't be able to make it with the EV range because the distance that I've driven was way too long. And remember, the system takes into consideration that I can only do overnight charging, not during the day. If I can charge during the day, I can add this flexibility into the system, and I'll show you immediately how. And then if it is because of cost, it will be more expensive. So for the ones that you have with red X's, then it may be this other reason. It can also be here, you can see this vehicle doesn't have enough data to run an assessment. So we're not sure 100% that will be an estimate, but because there's no enough data, we're not recommending to switch to EV. And then it may be the VIN that cannot be decoded, vehicle year, make, model information is not available as yet. And we can scroll through the pages and look at the rest of the reasons. What I'm going to go next, I'll look at summaries. And remember, if I can allow the flexibility to charge during the day. So here I have allow daytime charging. So let's say I can allow maybe 2 days a month, and you could see how my assessment has changed. So remember, if I had 0 here, so if I had 0, this is what it was looking like. So 15 BEV, 6 hybrids. And if I change into 2 days a month, my assessment completely changes. If it will be because of the cost, so if I'm able to add, let's say, $1,000 per vehicles, again, my recommendation changes because some of the options were a little bit more expensive. So if I'm happy to pay more, I can add the EV premium. But if I'm not, I'll just leave it as 0, and that's my basic recommendation. So that's it on the EVSA. I will quickly show you something else that we have on my Geotab. Is basically we have an integration now with OpenCharge that will show you the the chargers that are available, public chargers, and Enoch touched on the infrastructure. So what it is you see the ad in here, so I'll just switch it on and then I will be able to zoom in to the countries that I'm interested. So I'll go look at South Africa and I have one that I've been zoomed in here. So you can see an idea of the chargers that are available. That's one of the integrations that we have, and we're planning to introduce a new partner as well. So to really offer even a broader range of partners that they can provide public chargers. That's it from me. So Enoch, if you want to take over. So I will.
Not a problem, not a problem.
I'll stop sharing. And thank you if you have any questions on here.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. That was actually very interesting. Just a few points that you've covered that stood out. You've mentioned that with the EVSA platform, it basically allows for an analysis to also enlighten or give you an indication of which vehicles do not need changing?
Yes, that's right. So it depends on where you are in your journey at the moment, and depending on activity and the cost that will impact, we may just recommend you a certain percentage as a transition to EV. It will not always happen that we have to transition fully to EV. This process is gradual, and based on the real data, we can recommend with using the EVSA tool from Geotab, what will be the best for your fleet and how you could save cost by transitioning to EVSA, to EV electric vehicles. Did I answer your question?
No, definitely. That was one of the questions that was received while you were doing your presentation. Thank you very much, Elena. I think we can basically just continue and conclude from my side. So one of the things that we mentioned just before we went over from your side is which industries can actually benefit from EVs as we stand and where we are currently in South Africa. We see that from the list, we've got a few. We've got the last mile delivery. I mean, with the change that COVID-19 has pushed everyone globally, we've seen a lot of last mile delivery businesses booming everywhere around us. You know, we've got apps that deliver food to our houses. We had medicines. That is what we basically call the last mile delivery. The transportation of goods or products from the retailers to your consumers. And this is one of the most benefiting industries, if I can check based on research. And furthermore, we've got other companies like your security companies, which if you think about it, security companies or security vehicles will be stationed in a central point, being ready for, let's say, responding to an emergency. So if you consider, for example, with the EVSA city bike, where the average range is between 100 to 150 kilometers, which is not pretty bad. And if one wishes to actually upgrade to more kilometers or drive range, those options are available, not only with that mentioned city bike, but also with our available EVs currently on our market. And we've seen with research on average, the EVs that we currently have can range on average up to about 450 kilometers on a single full charge. Not only mentioning with the full charge, on average, the cost when it comes to a full charge, we've seen that it can average to about plus minus 15 cents to about 30 cents per kilometer. That speaks for itself in terms of numbers, right? So other industries that can benefit from this, we've got the government, we've got your electric utilities. So what are the electric utilities? If you think of, for example, again, the current EVs available on South Africa right now, or in the African market as we speak, they themselves will need to actually promote the product. And this is where the industry itself is benefiting from the EVSA as well, all right? But not only talking about the current industries that will benefit, emerging markets, we've seen there's a lot of energy and a buzz behind public and school buses. It's not yet something that we can say is already here, but there's a lot of discussions, questions, energy spent around the idea of school buses and public. I mean, if you just think about EVs and the range that those buses can cover in a day, it is within the range of your EVs, right? And then furthermore, we've had a couple of questions, guys. We understand the reality behind electric vehicles. We've got concerns. So here we've highlighted the major concerns, things like the infrastructure, the vehicle prices. Also, do we even have available models? So in terms of the available models, the answer has already been touched on, all right? The vehicle prices, when we look at the city bug, in terms of the average cost from that one, we've seen that a brand new city bug can cost anything between your 200 to about 350,000 rands on average. So again, that is something that is actually achievable from a fleet-based perspective, all right? Infrastructure. Helena, from your side, I think you ended off by showing us on the grid, couple of charging stations as we speak currently in South Africa. And I've seen some of our major malls have already stepped up and have introduced charging stations in their parking bays. Couple of petrol stations, right? So again, this is where we start talking about your faster DCs. You know, how long is it going to take to actually charge my vehicle if I'm using, let's say, for example, your petrol stations? The good news is, with the infrastructure that we currently have, we have mostly our faster DC charging stations. And that is good news when it comes to businesses. You need to be on the road. That is where your money is, and not only spending a lot of time in the charging stations. All right. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to discussions about EV, we have come to a conclusion, all right? We've come to the end of the session. And this was quite an exciting topic that we've touched on. I think before this webinar session, the question was if it will ever happen in SA. And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is not even to say it's a matter of when. It's actually a matter of it is already happening. So with that being said, as we know that we are headed in that direction, proudly as Geotab, as your #1 fleet telematics provider, we are proud of having taken the step and making sure that we are preparing to provide a solution when it comes to your EV requirements. With the EVSA platform, Elena, thank you so much explaining it in detail for us, showing us the reports, the percentages, and also highlighting how it can even identify where you do not even need to change to EV, ensuring that with your fleet, you are actually achieving the utmost, if we can put it that way. All right. So with that being said, Elena, I don't know if you'd like to say thank you, if you had to say goodbye to anybody on the other side.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this opportunity to be here with you. And thanks everyone for joining us.
All right. And from my side, guys, thank you again, once again, for the opportunity. And I do hope I will be seeing you guys shortly within our next webinar series. Keep a lookout for that on our social media platforms. We will be announcing which one or what topics we'll be covering. Remember, with Geotab Management by Measurement. As we log off, I'm going to just spend about 2 minutes or so. If there's any questions that you'd like to throw in, we'll be just shortly anticipating that, Helena and myself. Also make use of our social platforms. We are available on, you can visit us on Twitter, Instagram, or you can get in touch with us on info@geotabafrica.com, as well as you can also basically visit our website, Geotab Africa. Do you have a question? All right. How many kilos can a vehicle drive before it gets flat? So in the sense of the question is, what is the range? All right, in terms of that, on average, we've seen that the average drive range of an EV, I'm going to take the ones available in our markets, we're talking about between 100 kilometers for the EV bug, and we've seen average of your 450 to 500 when it comes to things like your e-tron or your Mini Cooper SE. All right. So again, just to shortly answer your question, between 100 to about, let's say, 450 kilometers on a single full charge. Helena, do you perhaps by any chance want to touch on or add on to the question that was just asked, the range?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. It also, you have to keep in mind, so depending on the vehicle model, you may have a different range, like you mentioned, Enoch. But you also need to take into consideration the temperature. Temperature has an impact on the range. So especially when it's very cold, which I don't think is like a major problem in South Africa, but I think sometimes it can get cool. What we see in Europe, like they work really well in the summer, and then in the winter, the range is significantly shorter. And then from the experienced drivers and from the industry, they were saying if they don't use the heating and they use the heated seats, it's helping the range. And then another thing, when there is, we have very, very hot temperatures, we are talking about something around 40 degrees Celsius, then again, we are more inclined to use the air conditioner, and then the range will be slightly lower than the optimum range. Optimum range for most vehicles are around 20 degrees Celsius. So that's the best. But if you think about anything between, I don't know, 10 to 30 is still quite good. If you go below that, above, then you can you have to take into consideration that the range will be slightly short or slightly lower.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you much, Alena. On our chairs, I see we've got Isaac Malapela from SA Secure. Welcome to the session. It's interesting and pleasure having you, sir. I just have a question for Mr. Malapela that I can ask him. In terms of SA Secure, do you guys see yourself moving EV, and what is the possibility of you guys going electric in the near future? For SA Secure, do you see yourself going electric in the future? What is the possibility? Where do you think you guys can benefit? In brief, in terms of EV, how do you think you guys can benefit if it's something that you are looking at or seeing SA Secure moving towards in the near future?
We can obviously save on fuel usage. Actually, the reason for me to ask about the kilometers is sometimes vehicles are driving more than 100 kilometers in a shift. That is the main reason why I was asking how long does it take for the vehicle to be flat? And you guys answered that minimum 100 kilometers, if I understood you correctly. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So it seems like it's something that you would definitely benefit from as an organization. All right. I think from that point, then, Isaac, if you have any further questions, seeing that it's something that can benefit the organization, drop us an email or get in touch with our support team from our social medias, and we can basically see how the platform can provide a solution to your fleet. All right. So with that being said, I think then if there's any further questions from any of our viewers, you can just drop them and we will attend to them. Mr. Isaac, we will be in touch. We'll be talking more and discussing this opportunity with you as shortly we're done with this session. All right. So thank you very much for participating as well. All right, guys, I think with that being said, we can call today's session to an end. We don't have any further questions. All right, from my side, Enoch and Elena, on your side, I just want to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.